Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Gloria Huang. Gloria is a freelance writer whose fiction pieces have been published in many literary journals, and she's here today to talk about her debut middle grade novel, Kaya of the Ocean. This book is an exciting, fresh, and beautiful middle grade fantasy about embracing who you really are. And it's for every reader, everywhere, young and old. And I promise it's sure to leave its mark on you as it did on me. There is so much to explore in this beautiful book. So let's get right to the episode. Gloria, welcome to KidLit Love. I'm so glad you're here today.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, if listeners have been listening to this podcast for a while, they know I have a very special book list in my notebook that I have to share with you because your book is now on that list and it is my most treasured book list.
Oh.
And that is the list of the books I've hugged when I'm done.
I love that. I love that.
Your book was definitely a huggable book, and I can't wait to talk about it. But first, I want to talk about you. This is your debut middle grade novel, which is so exciting, but you are certainly no stranger to the written word. So I'd love for you to start with a bit about you and your work and your journey of how you're arriving in children's literature.
For sure. Thanks. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So I'm one of those people, and I think there's a lot of us out there, but I'm always hesitant. I'm like, is it obnoxious to say it this way? But I'm one of those people who've always wanted to be a writer ever since I was a child.
Mhm.
Like would write it in diaries, would write it in journals, and was writing kind of short stories and even novels, quote unquote, and I'm doing air quotes here, when I was very young. But I think really became serious, obviously, when I was older, and I started getting my short stories published in literary fiction magazines, and that was really kind of my intro to being a published writer. And that was a really good entrant point into writing novels. I think writing short stories, a lot of my short stories become the seeds for later novels to bloom. I'm losing the metaphor a little bit, but a lot of the ideas from my short stories actually will become books later. And just the act of writing short stories and the act of getting them published was really kind of good training ground for getting my novel published. And I guess the way I got into Kidlit specifically was I really feel like for me, middle grade books were my gateway into like the beautiful world of reading and writing, and so that was always something that I really wanted to be part of. And I'm really honored to actually have my debut be a middle grade novel. So that was kind of how I started aiming towards that. Yeah, and so I'm really excited now to have Kaya be my first novel.
It really is a special age and a special genre. I
It
agree
really
with you.
is.
There's just something, magical about that time and also horrific about that time that books can bring us such comfort and so much during those ups and downs, turbulent years of being a middle grade and eventually a middle school uh, reader. And so I love that that's where you're making your home.
I completely agree. I think it's exactly kind of the duality of both those things, where it's exciting and there's so many fresh new experiences, but it can be terrifying and there's a lot of insecurity and doubt as well. So it is a really important age, but I also think it's a special age because a lot of the kids who are reading middle grade fiction are kind of just exiting that really innocent time of childhood and they're getting into the more savvy teen years, but they haven't entirely lost that magic yet. So there's still a part of them that can and wants to believe in magic, at least in the literary world. So it makes it a fun kind of age to write for, where there's just like so much imagination happening.
Which brings us to talk about your debut novel. It's just beautiful
Thank you so much.
in so many ways. I can't wait to talk about some of the big themes that are evident in the book, that touched my heart in the book, that I wish I had when I was a kid reading the book. But for listeners who are brand new to you and are brand new to your novel, can you give us a little background about it without spoilers, of course, but a bit of background and your inspiration for writing this particular story as your debut?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, so Kaya of the Ocean is a contemporary middle grade fiction, and it has elements of Chinese mythological fantasy. And it's about a young girl, a 13-year-old girl named Kaya, who's Chinese American and who's growing up in Hawaii. And she struggles with anxiety and a very strong fear of the ocean, a fear of water, which is, of course, difficult because living in Hawaii, you're surrounded by water. Um, and something happens during this period, and it's winter in Hawaii, and her cousin and her aunt come to visit from Manhattan, and so there's a lot of kind of dynamics between her and her cousin, and her and her friends, and her and this boy that she has a close friendship with. But her anxiety kind of gets triggered, and she notices that when she's around water, really strange things start to happen, and so that's really terrifying for her. And I don't think it's spoiling it too much to say that she ultimately discovers that she is secretly descended from a Chinese mythological water goddess named Mazu, who is actually a real Chinese mythological water goddess. And kind of the climax of the story is really her trying to find out why this has happened, what she can do to try and kind of control these powers because they become increasingly dangerous, and what she can do before, they're a danger to her or those she loves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were like parallel tracks that I just couldn't get enough of. I was so head over heels for that mythology piece. I hadn't known, I hadn't heard of it. I'm always looking for something new to learn. So I really loved digging my toes in there. But at the same time, you also have your character going through that anxiety that kind of connects as she's trying to figure out what is going on, what is wrong, what is real, what isn't. And it's just this beautiful back and forth with, as you mentioned, these friends that are there, a family who's trying to understand and she's trying to communicate with. Just has everything wrapped up in the book that I think a middle grade reader would be able to settle into.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it that way. I did sort of feel like you asked about inspiration. The inspiration for the book did kind of come almost on two parallel tracks. I would say that the anxiety portion came because when I first started writing the book, the world was kind of just emerging from the pandemic. And, a lot of people, I'm sure, were kind of feeling the after effects for a while. And there were a lot of children in my life who I'm very close to who started suffering from anxiety for the first time. And that was something that I suffered from as a child. And it was really hard to see them go through it, having been through it and sometimes still struggling through it, just how terrifying it was. I think as a child, you tend to internalize a lot of things. It's the first time you've experienced it. So there's a lot of what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. And that was heartbreaking. And so I started thinking about writing this book that could be kind of a message to these children who are kind of waging these quiet wars that we can't see, about the fact that there's nothing wrong with them, that even if there are flaws or there are imperfections, that it's part of the complicated, beautiful people they are. And learning to kind of accept that can be kind of powerful, and so that was kind of that side of the inspiration. And then the other side about Mazu and the culture was I think it does tend to infuse a lot of what I write. I think I mentioned reading middle grade books when I was younger, and I loved them so much, but I definitely remember some of the ones I loved the most feeling um, like, oh, there's nobody here that really looks like me, or there's nobody here that really comes from a family like mine. So I think I do tend to write to put that in there in some capacity. But in this case, I think I'd been thinking a lot about Mazu, who is a goddess that my father told me about when I was younger. And I'd never really read much about her in especially in children's lit, but just in general. But she's this fascinating, strong female figure in a space that doesn't necessarily usually have that. And to this day, she's revered, especially in coastal towns in China and Taiwan. And, fishermen worship her and pray to her for safe passage. So she's still very much kind of an existing figure. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to tie a fictional version of this very, very powerful female goddess to this young Asian American girl's struggle with anxiety and see if I could send a message through that kind of path.
And it really is the perfect fit. And I think I can say this, I think, without giving spoilers. There is this beautiful connection between what she is feeling on the inside and those inner emotions and sometimes turmoil and sometimes anxiety and what happens to the water that she encounters on the outside in
Yeah.
her physical life. And I just loved the interplay between the two of them.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I that was very actually that was almost the third inspiration for me was a lot of the first kind of seeds of this book came to me when I was, again, it was kind of we were emerging from the pandemic, so everyone was outside a lot, and I live in California, so I have a lot of proximity to water and ocean, and I was standing on kind of this deserted beach, and it was nighttime and I was listening to the ocean, just like feeling the power and thinking a lot about the ocean. And the ocean actually features pretty prominently in my writing because it's just it I'm amazed by it. I'm in awe of it. I'm sometimes afraid of it. And it seemed kind of like the perfect metaphor for a lot of what people with anxiety go through and kind of the like ups and downs and the swells and the divots. So that was a huge part of it as well. Yeah.
I think that's why I connected with it. I have always been an anxious kid. I am still an anxious adult, so I could feel it. Like when you read the book, whether you struggle with anxiety or not, I feel like you're writing the the context of the story, everything going on. Like I felt like I could feel what she was feeling because of the way that you represented it in the water. And I think that's why I had to hug it. I had to just keep it close.
I love that. I that's one of the best compliments I've got, that it's a huggable book. I really appreciate that. I appreciate what you're saying because I think for me it was very important to kind of portray anxiety in as authentic way as I could, and I know everyone experiences it differently, but I wanted to make sure that it was as real to kind of my experience and as possible and the experience of the children close to me. And I think part of anxiety is that sometimes you're okay and sometimes you have your close friendships and your family and you have joy and you can make jokes and everything's fine, and then sometimes you're overtaken by it, and it's kind of like the ocean. It's very unpredictable that way.
Yes. Yes. And throughout the story, as she's attempting to figure out what's going on, to decide what do I need, who do I tell, when does this end? There's this message of you can ask for help. It's really hard for many of us to do, but once you put it out there on the outside, right, there are people that are there. And I don't want to say too much about the people that end up understanding her quite well, but it's there if we are willing to ask for it. And I felt like that is such a good lesson to let especially middle grade readers know in their childhood that you may feel this too. And just like Kaya, you can find a way to talk to people about it. You don't have to get to a breaking point to get the support that you deserve.
Yes, I completely agree, and I love that you caught that. I think for me, when I was writing this, I was really part of the message was exactly that. That sometimes when people are struggling with something, especially children, and they, again, it's the first time they don't know if something's wrong with them, there's a tendency to kind of hide it and pretend everything's okay. And I think that that just kind of reinforces the loneliness and the isolation and the worry that like it's just me, and so part of this was kind of, I wanted them to not feel so alone and to make sure they knew that there are people around them who are either going through the same thing or even if they're not, who want to be there to support them.
Yeah.
So kind of wanted to show that.
Let's talk a little bit about the opening of the book, because oh my goodness, the opening of the book, those first couple of pages, like completely hooked, of
Thank
taking
you.
us back, like way back in time to the beginning. And then throughout the book, we get glimpses of what's going on now, what was going on then. I loved that back and forth as the book progressed, the history, so to speak, progressed as well. How did you decide to choose that format and to weave those together like that? It was so effective. You had me at hello with
Oh,
with that opening.
thank you so much. I love that. I think for me, part of it was once the threads kind of started coming together, I had this one inspiration about anxiety, I had this other inspiration about Mazu, and then I started thinking about, what if I tied them together, but it was a new thread, and this is the fictional part. What if there was a new line of descendants from Mazu? And this allowed me kind of to play within um, the the sphere of like putting it in different points in time. And so I think that that was, I wanted to show something where there was an ancestral thread kind of through the female line that had been created to kind of try and like save their people. But I also, if I'm perfectly honest, wanted to write in some of these points. So I thought it was really exciting to be able to write at these different points of history, and to have that connect at the end. So it was partially for the story and partially as a writer, me just wanting to explore some of those worlds.
Well, and if that's what you love exploring as a writer, you can feel that generally as a reader. So that comes through. And I can't talk about the one scene that will forever be in my mind at the end when everything comes together. I have to think that that was probably one of my favorite parts to visualize.
Thank you. It was actually one of my favorite scenes to write too.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that came through.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I'm being very cagey because I don't want to spoil it. So listeners, you're just going to have to read it and then find us and let us know if you know the part we're talking about at the end where it just so beautifully comes together.
Oh, thank you so much.
Um, as an adult reader, right, I believe that everyone should read children's literature all the time. Kids certainly, but every adult still has an inner child, that is in them.
Definitely.
And I feel
Definitely.
like no matter the age of this reader, one of the things, at least personally, that I kept coming back to for me, that I imagine a lot of other readers would as well, is that there's something deep inside all of us, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes we're searching for it, and sometimes we're frustrated trying to figure out who we are and what our thing is and what's next and who are we in this world? All of those big existential questions, of course, that adults might ask. And I feel like this book and seeing Kaya go through her experience, it just reminds us we all have something. There
Yeah.
is something within all of us. There is a lineage within all of us. There is a culture and a heritage and a
Yeah.
family and a spirit. And I felt this sense of curiosity to just want to explore mine. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to call up my parents. I wanted to go through my old family photos
I love that.
and just take that deeper dive. So I think your book is a beautiful spark for kids to dive into their own histories, families, cultures, whatever it is, or just
That's
themselves.
great.
To
Yeah.
think what is my kind of literal superpower, for lack of a better word, that could be rolling around inside of me.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I I think there was a piece I wrote after the book came out, and it was from Kaya's perspective, and that was really one of the kind of main points at the beginning. She's like, you might wonder, what do I do if I'm not, a goddess? And she's like, well, aren't we all sort of goddesses? And so I really wanted to kind of put that through that, like, um, I think part of it is finding this like this thing in yourself, this core that you can that is uniquely you and that is so important to you that you can be proud of. And then the flip side of it, which is kind of the other side of the same coin is that um, it's all of you, it's all parts of you, and it's I think Kaya's dad says an expression in it, a Chinese expression that's 缺陷美, and it's something that my grandfather used to say a lot, and it just means that everything is actually more beautiful when it's flawed or imperfect, and I really want kind of that to be the message that I think that as adults, as kids, there's so much pressure to be perfect, to not make mistakes, and that can be a really crushing thing, and I really want people to embrace that it's actually all parts of you, including the imperfections, anything that makes you unique and special. And, that's what makes you kind of the beautiful person you are. So that's my takeaway.
It's a beautiful takeaway. And I was going to follow up, with one of the questions I like to ask authors is, what is your hope for readers? What do you hope they will walk away with? And I think you just answered that beautifully.
Thank you
Is
so
there
much.
anything
Yeah.
you want to add to that when you think about, your first debut middle grade novel and kids getting their hands on it? What is your hope for this first book?
I think it is very much that kids walk away having read it, and especially if they're struggling with something, whether it's anxiety or something else, or even if they're not, just knowing that um, everybody's going through something, but they're not alone, and there's so many people out there for them. But that also there's nothing wrong with them. That that it's we're all kind of complex human beings that have different parts of us, and some parts we might not always love as much, but it's what kind of makes us unique and beautiful. It's the 缺陷美. So that's really what I hope people take away. But I do hope they enjoy the other parts of it, the cultural references and kind of just this different world that I try to meld together for them.
Well, I think that's why the message comes across so clear, is because you've done that in that way where they have those beautiful connections. Uh, your hope, I think, is going to be right on the money for
Thank
kids
you so
who
much.
are reading that.
Thank
Um,
you. It's
they
it's
said
funny.
it's going to be a book that I keep close.
Oh,
There's
thank you
a
so much.
wonderful way it made an adult reader feel.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I did also want to mention, because I think you had asked about Mazu before and kind of tying it all together. And one thing that happened that I thought was pretty interesting, I had done some research on Mazu before I started writing the book, but I'd kind of intentionally not dove too far into it because I was creating this new fictional thread. But then there's a part at the end, or closer to the end, where Kaya and her friends need to understand more about Matsu, and then so more about Matsu is revealed. And when I did that research, I actually found that there were so many parts of Mazu's kind of mythology that patterned onto my book without intending it to, like the fact that she had two sidekicks that were initially enemies, that she then like those kind of things. Actually, it kind of for me it felt almost like kismet. I was like, oh, this book is
That's right.
it's just coming together now. I'm not even pulling the threads anymore. So
It
it's
was meant to be.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
So this was your debut.
Mhm.
Are there any things that you're working on next that you could give us a sneak peek into?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm really excited that I was just before Christmas, actually, I sold another middle grade novel, and I'm really excited about that. It's not fully announced yet, so I can't give too many details, but I think I can say that it's not related to Kai of the Ocean, but it is a contemporary middle grade fiction, and it has speculative elements again. So I realized I was like, oh, I think I have a type.
A thing, you have a niche.
I do. And I'm also working on I'm writing a young adult right now, and it's similarly contemporary fiction, and it has speculative elements. And this one I'm folding in a little more historical fiction. So I definitely have a type. I definitely have a favorite genre,
Yeah.
but I'm really excited about both of those projects.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you have that type
Ah, thank you
because
so
it
much.
it It really did. It really landed as a reader. So I'm glad to know that there are other books in the future that we could look forward to.
Oh, thank you. I
Where
appreciate
can
that.
listeners find you online so they can keep up to date with those books and check out, of course, the other things that you've written before you came to the middle grade space? Any places you'd like to share to find you online?
Yeah, I think the best place is probably to go to my website. It's www.glorialaihuang.com. So GLORIALAIHUANG.com. I try and keep it as up to date as possible with kind of past and ongoing projects. And I have my social media is like constantly moving
Yeah.
world now, but like I have my social media links there, so they can hopefully find me there. And yeah, and Kaya came out January 7th, so it should be in bookstores, bookshop.org, Amazon. It was published by Holiday House and distributed by Penguin Random House, so it's kind of all those places if you want to look for it.
Readers, you do want to. And I
Thanks
will
so
I
much.
will put links to your website and of course links directly to your book in the show notes to make it as easy as possible. I know I've
Thank you so
inspired a
much.
lot of other people to make lists of books that they've hugged. And so I have a feeling I'll be hearing from some of our loyal listeners that they agree with me on this
I
one.
love that. I love that so much. I'm gonna have to start a list of books I've liked too.
Please do. It's
Right.
a game changer for your reading life.
Right.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for coming on to talk about the book. I loved it, and I'm so grateful to be able to share it with others who are listening. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. This has been so much fun. I appreciate it.
And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit Love. Thanks for listening.